Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive, a place where forgotten stories breathe again, where whispers crawl from the cracks of reality, and fear finds a voice. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because some tales were never meant to be told. Tonight's story is titled, "The Girl Who Watched the World Fade." Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. The house at the edge of Larkspur Lane. They said the old house was empty, but June knew better. She saw things. Not ghosts, at least not the kind that wore white sheets or rattled chains. No, what June saw was subtle, like shadows where light should be, or laughter that didn't belong to anyone in sight. The house at the edge of Larkspur Lane had been a sore spot in the neighborhood for years. A sprawling Victorian ruin with ivy-choked walls and windows that seemed to blink shut when you looked too long. She passed it every day on the way to school. And every day she tried not to stare, until the woman moved in. June was 13 the first time she saw her. It was late August. The air buzzed with the last gasps of summer, cicadas screaming in the trees, the sky bruised with heat. June walked alone, her little brother was back home, sick again. Her backpack bounced against her spine as she turned the corner onto Larkspur and froze. A car, bright emerald green, too shiny for the dusty road, sat parked in the driveway of the house that should have been empty. And then she saw her. The woman wore white gloves and pruning shears, trimming the thorny hedge like she'd lived there forever. She looked up and waved. Her hair was coiled in a perfect bun, and her lips were red like crushed berries. "You're just in time," the woman called. "I've got lemonade. Come and sit a while." June should have kept walking, should have ignored her and gone straight home. But something in the woman's voice, soft, musical, impossible to disobey, pulled her forward. The backyard was a jungle of lilies, fat and white, like open mouths gasping for air. The woman poured lemonade into tall glasses full of ice, the cubes clicking like teeth. "You're June, aren't you? I've seen you walking by." June blinked. "Yeah, but how did you?" "I have a way of knowing things," she said with a smile that never touched her eyes. Her name was Miss Hallie. At least that's what she said. She smelled like roses and something fainter beneath it, metallic like old pennies or blood. But she was kind, warm, funny even. June found herself laughing, sipping lemonade that was too sweet, eating sugar cookies that melted in her mouth. Miss Hallie asked questions. About school, about her brother, about what June liked to do in her spare time. June didn't realize she'd stayed until the shadows stretched across the lawn and the air went cool. "You should go," Miss Hallie said gently, brushing a strand of hair from June's forehead. "Your mother will be worried." June left with a strange ache in her chest, a weight she couldn't explain. When she glanced back, Miss Hallie was still standing there, one hand on her hip, smiling like she knew something June didn't. That night, Will's fever broke. It was a small miracle. Her mom said the new antibiotics must have finally kicked in, but Will insisted it was a dream. He said someone with bright red lips whispered to him that he'd be fine. "She sang to me," he mumbled, half asleep, "like a lullaby I used to know." June didn't tell her mother what she saw. She didn't tell her about the lemonade or the lilies or how Miss Hallie seemed to bloom from the garden itself. She just stared out the window and watched the night press in like a heavy blanket. The next week, June went back. This time Will came with her. She hadn't meant to bring him, but he followed her down the sidewalk, pale and skinny in his oversized hoodie, dragging his feet like a sleepwalker. Miss Hallie smiled when she saw them. Two guests. How lovely. The cookies were fresher this time, the lemonade colder, the lilies taller. Will adored her instantly, called her Miss H. She took a picture of them that day, an old Polaroid camera she said she found at a flea market. Will grinned into the lens, eyes bright, cheeks pink with health. "Let me see," he asked. Miss Hallie laughed. No, it needs to develop, just like you." June never saw the photo. By mid-September, Will was always at Miss Hallie's. June too, though she didn't know why. She'd sit in that garden and sip lemonade while the world around them became quiet. Too quiet. One day she noticed something strange. The trees never lost their leaves. The air never cooled. School was in full swing, but the garden still clung to summer like it refused to let go. "Why is it always warm here?" she asked. Miss Hallie smiled. "Because I want it to be." It was around then the news started to spread. 2 boys from her school went missing. Not far. Same age as Will. Her mom started locking the doors at night. The neighborhood had a curfew. But June didn't feel afraid. Not really. Not until she saw Miss Hallie's car parked outside another house. Not until she realized the lilies were growing in someone else's yard. Part 2. The Things That Bloom in Silence. June didn't tell anyone about the other house. She saw it on a Thursday walking home alone after choir practice. The sun was low, casting long, soft shadows on the sidewalk. The air smelled like mowed grass and something sweeter, like lilies. The house was 2 streets over from Larkspur Lane. Same bright green car in the driveway. Same exact model, same license plate. But the house was different. Smaller, brick instead of wood, with a crooked mailbox and peeling shutters. And there, kneeling in the garden, was Miss Hallie. June stopped walking. The woman didn't look up. She wore different clothes, a red sundress with white gloves, but she moved exactly the same, pulling weeds and pruning lilies that hadn't been there the day before. How could she be there when June had just seen her on Larkspur Lane that morning, handing Will a jar of strawberry jam? Her throat went dry. She wanted to call out, wanted to ask why she was there, what she was doing, but something in the air told her not to. She backed away, slow, careful. Like a kid who had just realized the thing she thought was a statue was breathing. That night, Will didn't come home. At first, their mom thought he was at a friend's, then at the library, then maybe he stayed late at school. June wanted to speak, to say he was probably with Miss Hallie. But every time she opened her mouth, the words wouldn't come. Something in her brain clamped down on the thought. When her mother started calling neighbors, June went outside. The night was cold. Cold for the first time in weeks. She walked to the end of their street, heart pounding like something trying to escape her chest. And when she turned the corner, the green car was gone. The house on Larkspur Lane was empty again. The garden was wilted. The lilies dead. The police came the next morning. They asked June questions. When did she last see him? Did he say anything strange? Did he seem upset? She told them he was happy, that he'd gotten better, that he liked someone named Miss Hallie. But they couldn't find any record of her. No one by that name had moved into the house. They said the property was still listed as abandoned. The officers exchanged glances, scribbled in their little notepads. They were kind but distant, like they were already moving on. By Monday, Will's face was on the news. By Friday, the story was gone. School was a blur after that. People whispered. Some offered sympathy. Most avoided her. Missing kids made people uncomfortable, like it was contagious. June stopped speaking in class. She stopped eating lunch. She dreamed of lilies. And sometimes she dreamed of Will, standing perfectly still inside a jar, his eyes wide open but unfocused, like he was looking at something from very far away. She stayed away from Larkspur Lane for almost a year, but she never stopped thinking about it. It was nearly October the next time she saw her. June had just turned 14. Her mom was working nights now, tired all the time. Their house was quiet, heavy. She went out for a walk, just to get out of the silence, and found herself 3 streets over without realizing it. The green car was there again, in front of a different house. June didn't move. She stared at it, heart hammering. Her mouth was dry again. The door to the house opened, and out stepped Miss Hallie. She looked exactly the same. The same red lipstick, the same flawless skin, not a day older. She turned and saw June, and smiled, not surprised, not confused, just pleased, like she'd been waiting. "I was wondering when you'd come by," Miss Hallie said. Her voice was smooth as always, but something about it twisted in June's stomach this time. "You're not real," June said. Her voice cracked. "You can't be real." Miss Hallie tilted her head. "And yet here I am. I saw you at different houses. You're not from here. What are you?" Miss Hallie stepped closer. "I'm a gardener. I plant things. I grow things. I keep things alive." June took a step back. "Where's Will?" Miss Hallie didn't answer right away. She looked at the sky as if trying to decide whether to lie or not. "He's safe," she said at last. "He's somewhere warm, somewhere quiet. He doesn't hurt anymore." "That's not an answer." "No," she said softly, "but it's the truth." June ran. She didn't look back. Didn't stop until she was home, hands shaking, tears drying on her cheeks. She wanted to scream. But what would she say? That the woman who stole her brother never aged? That she changed houses like clothes? That she grew flowers where children disappeared? Who would believe her? She started keeping a notebook. Every time she saw the green car, she wrote down the address. Every time she saw a new garden blooming where it hadn't been before, she marked it on a map. By the time she was 15, she had 12 addresses. 3 of them had news reports of missing children. 2 of them had unexplained fires. 1 of them was condemned after biohazardous materials were found in the basement. June didn't sleep much after that. One day she followed the car. It took her across town into a cul-de-sac she'd never been to. She watched from behind a trash bin as Miss Hallie knocked on a stranger's door. The woman who answered looked tired, frazzled. She had a kid clinging to her leg. June couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the mother hesitate, then nod, then open the door wide. Miss Hallie stepped inside. June's blood turned to ice. Part 3: The Book of Names. The next day, June went back to the cul-de-sac. It was raining, a thin gray drizzle that soaked her hoodie and made her socks squish in her shoes. She stood across the street from the house Miss Hallie had entered, hands jammed in her pockets, heart hammering. She waited, but the green car wasn't there. The house looked normal. There were toys on the lawn, a stroller on the porch. The curtains in the window fluttered as if someone had just passed behind them. She knocked anyway. The woman who answered was the same from the day before, messy ponytail, sunken eyes, a baby on her hip. "Yes." June hesitated. I'm doing a school project," she lied, "about urban development in older neighborhoods. I wanted to ask about the gardens, like how people choose flowers or plant types. I saw lilies here the other day. Did you plant them?" The woman looked at her strangely. "There aren't any lilies." June blinked. "Sorry?" The woman shifted the baby on her hip and stepped outside. "I don't have a garden. I've been meaning to start one, but I don't have time. You must be thinking of someone else." June looked past her. The yard was patchy with crabgrass. No lilies, no flowers, just mud and forgotten toys. "But I saw." "Listen, kid," the woman said not unkindly, "I'm real tired. Unless this is about utilities or something, I've got to get back inside." The door closed softly. June stood there for a long time. She didn't imagine it. She knew what she saw. So why was there no trace? At home, she opened her notebook and flipped through the pages. Addresses, notes, strange patterns. Then she remembered something. One of the first times she visited Miss Hallie's garden, she'd seen a book. A small, green leather-bound journal resting on a wrought iron table beside the lemonade tray. At the time, it hadn't seemed important. But now, it could have been anything. A guest book, a recipe journal, a ledger, or a list of children. That night, June went online. She searched for missing kids in her area. The names were too many. The details were vague, but the dates mattered. She started building a spreadsheet, cross-referencing names, locations, and the timeline of Miss Hallie's appearances. A pattern began to form. Every neighborhood she had tracked the green car to had a disappearance within a month of its arrival, sometimes sooner. It wasn't proof, but it was close. She printed out the addresses, used string and tacks to mark them on the corkboard above her bed. 12 spots, all arranged in a rough spiral, looping outward from one central point. Larkspur Lane. It all started there. She needed answers, not guesses, not dreams, facts, evidence, and she needed to find the book. She waited 2 weeks before the green car returned to Larkspur Lane. June spotted it on a Tuesday afternoon, parked as neat as a showroom model in front of the house no one should live in. She didn't hesitate. This time she was ready. She wore gloves, a hoodie, sneakers with good grip. She slipped in through the side yard and crouched beneath the hedge. The lilies had returned, tall, white, and swaying despite the still air. She waited until dusk. The lights in the house clicked off one by one. Miss Hallie was home. But by 9 o'clock, the house was dark and silent. June moved quickly. She crept across the yard, her breath loud in her ears. The back door was locked, but she knew how to pry it open with a flathead key. She stepped inside. The air was warm, too warm, like a greenhouse, and it smelled cloying and thick, not like flowers, like something rotting beneath them. She passed through the kitchen. The sink was full of blood-red water. A bundle of herbs floated on top, like drowned hair. In the living room, the furniture was covered in sheets. No dust, just empty, like someone moved in for a day and never unpacked. But the table was there, the one from before, and the book sat on top of it. It was smaller than she remembered, bound in green leather with a tiny silver clasp. No title. She undid the clasp. The pages were thick like parchment. Some were stained. Others smelled faintly of smoke. The first page was blank. The second had a name, William Harper. Beneath it, a Polaroid photograph, Will smiling into the camera. The next page held another name, another photo, a boy she didn't recognize, then another, and another, each page a life, each one cataloged, preserved, labeled like a specimen. June's hands trembled. She flipped to the most recent page. No name, just a blank space and a photo clipped to the top. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, brown curls, big eyes. She was still alive. June didn't know how she knew that, but she did. The blank name meant it wasn't finished. The air behind her changed. She froze. A whisper, a creak. June turned slowly. Miss Hallie stood in the doorway, silhouetted by moonlight, her white gloves dripping with soil. "You always were curious," she said softly. June clutched the book to her chest. "What is this?" Miss Hallie stepped forward. "A promise, a memory, a gift. You're stealing them, trapping them." "I'm saving them," Miss Hallie replied. "Do you know what the world does to children? It chews them up, breaks them, buries them. I give them peace. I give them forever." "No," June whispered. "You erase them. They don't feel pain. They don't age. They stay perfect. Isn't that what we all want? June stepped back. I want my brother back. Miss Hallie tilted her head. Then stay. Open the book. Add your name. And you'll never lose anything again. June turned and ran. She shoved through the door into the night, the book still clutched tight in her hands. Behind her, the house didn't follow, but the lilies did. They grew behind her as she fled, creeping, stretching, blooming in the sidewalk cracks. Part 4. The Garden Beneath the Skin. June didn't go home. She couldn't. Not with the book. Not with the lilies following her. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing behind an abandoned gas station on the edge of town. Her lungs burned. Her fingers ached from clutching the book so tightly. The streetlights flickered overhead. She opened the book again. The last page, the one with the girl, was still blank under the photo. But as she stared, she noticed something. The girl's expression was changing. It wasn't obvious. A slight shift in the tilt of her smile. The eyes just a little too wide. June slammed the book shut. She stayed there until dawn. When the sun finally rose, she walked home through side streets and alleyways, hiding the book beneath her hoodie. Her mother was asleep on the couch. The house smelled like stale coffee and silence. June locked herself in her room and started planning. She needed help. Not from adults, they didn't see it. They couldn't. But there was someone who might. Parker Abrams, junior conspiracy theorist, podcast addict, obsessive researcher of the bizarre and unexplained. He sat behind her in English and wore the same moth-eaten hoodie every day. He also ran a blog called Gray Matter, which mostly posted about urban legends and missing time reports. She messaged him. I need to show you something. You said you believed in patterns. I have one, but it's real and dangerous. The response came 5 minutes later. Meet me at the diner by the tracks. 11 a.m. Don't bring anyone else. June took the book with her. She wrapped it in a plastic grocery bag and stuffed it in her backpack. The lilies were gone, no signs of them on the sidewalk or anywhere else. But she felt them somehow, like seeds behind her eyes. Parker looked exactly like you'd expect. Pale, wiry, chewing on a straw like it was a cigarette. He wore an alien patch on his sleeve and had 2 phones on the table in front of him. You look like you haven't slept in a week, he said as she sat down. I haven't, she replied. She placed the book on the table, unwrapped it, and opened it. Parker didn't speak for a long time. He flipped slowly through the pages, his fingers careful like he was handling a bomb. Finally, he whispered, Jesus. June leaned in. Do you recognize any of them? Parker nodded. 3, maybe 4. They were all on my missing persons map. I didn't connect them before. The police said no patterns, no common cause. He turned another page. But this is evidence. It's more than that, June said. She's still doing it. She's moving house to house. Every time one kid disappears, and the garden grows. Parker looked up. Who is she? She calls herself Miss Hallie. She never changes. Same voice, same face, like she's frozen. Is she a human? June hesitated. I don't know. Parker opened his laptop. Okay, let's think logically. We've got a creature or an entity masquerading as a woman, possibly ageless, possibly immortal. Lures children, preserves them somehow, maybe feeds on something intangible. She says she saves them, June said bitterly, that she keeps them perfect. That's not saving, Parker muttered. That's pruning. He pulled up a satellite map, zoomed in on Larkspur Lane. You said the gardens come and go? June nodded. He started measuring distances. Then look at this. All her movements, they follow a spiral. Fibonacci pattern. That's not random. That's ritualistic. Why? Energy, Parker said. Old occult belief. Spirals concentrate spiritual or dimensional energy. She could be using the pattern to power something, sustain herself, or prepare for something larger. He looked at her. The book is the core, isn't it? It's her ledger, her anchor. June blinked. If we destroy it, we break the pattern. June took the book home that night. She didn't sleep. She stared at the blank page, and then flipped back to Will's. His photo was fading, like something was erasing it frame by frame, or eating it. She couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't just collect data and maps and theories. She had to see, really see. That weekend, she returned to Larkspur Lane. The house was gone. Not empty, gone. Where the house had stood was now an empty lot, freshly leveled. Sod laid down, too green to be real. No sign a building had ever been there. No plumbing, no driveway, no foundation. Just a single lily, growing in the exact center. She dug it up. The roots were pale and pulsing. They bled when she cut them. And beneath them was something buried, wrapped in linen, small. She pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a photo of her. The next night, her name appeared in the book, beneath her photo. Just one word, handwritten in black ink, June. She screamed and threw it across the room. But in the morning, it was back on her nightstand, the photo smiling up at her. She called Parker, told him everything. He didn't hesitate. We're burning it. Part 5, Fire and the Things That Wouldn't Burn. They met behind the school. The sky was slate gray, the wind sharp with autumn. The air smelled of smoke from distant chimneys and rotting leaves underfoot. Parker had brought a metal trash can and lighter fluid. June brought the book, wrapped in 2 plastic bags and a layer of duct tape. It still felt warm in her hands, still hummed. She didn't tell Parker that it whispered sometimes, when she was alone in her room, half asleep. It would open by itself, always to her page, always with her name a little darker than before. Once we do this, Parker said, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. He nodded. They poured the lighter fluid. June dropped the book into the can. Parker struck the match, and then the wind died. Not slowed, died. Everything around them went still. The trees froze mid-rustle. A car stopped down the street, engine idling like it forgot what it was doing. The world held its breath. The match landed on the book. The flame caught, and then extinguished. The match curled into ash. The book was dry. The fluid soaked it, but it didn't burn. June stared. Parker tried again. A whole box of matches. A blowtorch. Nothing. The leather hissed but wouldn't catch. The pages smoked, then reformed. One photo, a girl they didn't know, melted but reappeared seconds later. Same smile. Same blank eyes. June dropped to her knees. Why won't it burn? Parker didn't answer, because he saw it too. The shadows at the edge of the field. Lily petals floating on the wind, even though there were no flowers nearby. A shape standing between the trees. Too tall, too still. Watching. They left the trash can where it was and ran. June didn't stop until she reached her street. Even then, the petals followed. One landed on her shoulder. She brushed it off like it was poison. That night, she didn't sleep. The book sat on her dresser again, unharmed, open to her page. She ripped it out, shredded it, burned the pieces in the sink. When she returned to her room, the page was whole, still in the book, still smiling. She called Parker again. I think it's not the book that's anchored to the kids, she said, voice raw. It's the kids anchored to the book. We're trying to destroy the wrong thing. Parker didn't speak right away. Then, Then we destroy what created it. But Miss Hallie wasn't something you could find on a map. She moved like a ghost, appearing when she wanted, vanishing without a trace. Still, they tracked the green car. For 2 weeks, June skipped school. Parker hacked traffic cams. They followed leads, rumors, false sightings. And then one night they found her. The house was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by woods. A long dirt driveway. No neighbors for miles. The green car sat under a tree, leaves covering the windshield like the forest was trying to bury it. The lights were on inside. Warm yellow glow. June felt sick. Not scared, something deeper. Like guilt or fate. They didn't knock. They broke in through the back. Same layout. Same floral wallpaper. Same smell of lilies and copper. The furniture was newer but wrong. Unlived in. Like a model home staged by someone who had never lived among humans. In the center of the living room, a pedestal, and on it another book. Not green, red. Larger. Heavier. June approached slowly. This one had no lock. She opened it. Not names this time. Just drawings. Illustrations of plants, bones, bloodlines. Circles and spirals. Pages written in a language she didn't understand. Until the last one. It was in English, and it said, "The soil remembers. The garden does not grow without sacrifice. Beauty is a lie told to the rotting. Immortality is just a story told by the hungry." And beneath that, once a name is written, the root is planted. What blooms can never die. Parker read over her shoulder. She's not just preserving them. She's turning them into something else. Into seeds, he said, backing away. She's feeding the garden. June stepped away from the book, and then she saw it. A hallway, where there shouldn't have been one. At the end, a door, red with silver handles. No doorknob, no lock, but it opened when she touched it. The room beyond was cold. Not physically, spiritually, like the absence of heat, hope, or memory. The walls pulsed, and along them shelves. Hundreds, thousands, jars, and in each jar a figure. Some small, some malformed, some still human barely, floating in golden liquid, their faces blank, their eyes open. June fell to her knees, and there near the back was Will. His body was still, his hair floating like seaweed, but his eyes were alive, flickering, watching. June reached for the jar, but a voice stopped her. "You came back," Miss Hallie said. She stood in the doorway, white gloves, red smile, not a hair out of place. "You brought a friend this time." Parker raised a crowbar. "Stay away." Miss Hallie didn't flinch. She stepped into the room. "Do you like what I've made?" she asked June. "Isn't it peaceful?" "You're a monster. I'm a gardener. These are people." They were. Now they're safe. No pain. No death. Just stillness. And isn't that what you wanted? June touched the glass. Will's eyes met hers and blinked. "Let him go," she whispered. "Please." Miss Hallie walked closer. "You don't understand. If I let him go, the garden dies. The spiral breaks. And what comes after isn't better." June stood up. "I don't care." Miss Hallie tilted her head. "Then take his jar. But know this, once you uproot something, it never grows back the same." June hesitated, then lifted the jar. It was warm, alive. Will's hand pressed to the glass. The walls groaned. A wind howled through the room where there were no windows. The shelves began to tremble. Parker grabbed her arm. "We have to go. Now." Part 6. The Spiral That Eats Itself. They ran. June held the jar tight to her chest, its heat pulsing through the glass like a heartbeat. Behind them, the hallway collapsed. Not physically, no wood or stone cracked, but something deeper broke. The walls dimmed. The shelves flickered like dying light bulbs, and the things in the jars began to stir. Some twitched, some screamed. A sound like hundreds of tiny mouths gasping into thick liquid. June didn't look back, but she heard them, not calling for help, calling for her. Parker kicked open the front door. The house was no longer quiet. The walls groaned. The floor pulsed beneath their feet. The ceiling shifted like lungs inhaling. Miss Hallie stood in the foyer. She didn't try to stop them. She just watched. As June and Parker ran past, she whispered, "You've taken a seed out of the soil. Now the garden will starve." They didn't stop running until they reached the tree line. The house behind them shrank, then shimmered. June turned just in time to see it blink out, gone like a dream ending mid-sentence. Only the green car remained, covered in moss. Tires melted into the earth. She almost expected it to grow roots. They kept going until they reached the road. An old gas station stood nearby, half collapsed, its windows shattered. They ducked inside, breathless, shaking. June set the jar down carefully on a crate. Inside, Will was awake, really awake. He blinked. His lips moved. His fingers curled slowly like petals unfolding. "We need to get him out," Parker said. "Now." "With what?" He looked around, found an old tire iron. "This is going to suck," he said. "Hold it steady." June gritted her teeth. The first strike cracked the glass. The second split it. The third shattered it. The fluid rushed out, golden, thick, with a scent like burning honey and rust. Will collapsed onto the crate, limp. June caught him before he fell. His skin was clammy, his breath ragged, but he was breathing. "Will," she whispered, brushing hair from his eyes. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered. "June?" She sobbed. He was thin, pale, changed, but he was real. Parker pulled out a blanket from the emergency kit, wrapped Will in it. "We need to get out of here. Find help." June nodded. "And then we end it." Parker frowned. "Didn't we already try that?" "We tried burning the book," she said. "But what if the book's not the root? What if it's the spiral itself?" Parker blinked. "You mean the pattern?" She pointed to her notebook, which she still carried in her backpack. Inside was the spiral map, the movement of the car, the sites of each appearance. The garden had been growing in a sequence, a perfect path. "What happens," she whispered, "if we break it?" They found refuge in Parker's uncle's old workshop, long abandoned, half-eaten by ivy. No cell signal, no electricity, but it was quiet, and for the first time in days the book didn't follow them. Not yet. Will slept for 18 hours. When he woke, he didn't remember much, just fragments. A lullaby, a woman with red lips, the feeling of floating. He cried when he saw June. "I thought you were gone," he said. "I thought I was too," she replied. That night, June spread the spiral map across the table. She marked every known appearance, 12 total. They formed a perfect golden ratio curve, winding out like a fingerprint. The next site was predictable. Already she could sense it, a pressure in the air, like the world waiting to exhale. "We break it," she said. "We interrupt the pattern. We stop the spiral before it completes the next loop." Parker studied the map. What if it fights back? It already has. June knew where the next site would be. The suburb north of town. Willow Bend. Freshly built homes. Lots of kids. Perfect soil. They didn't call the police. Didn't warn the neighbors. They went straight to the center, where the spiral would land next. There they found an empty lot, with a single lily growing in the middle. "She's already started," Parker said. June stepped forward. Something buzzed beneath her feet. She reached down and yanked the flower from the earth. The soil screamed, not metaphorically. A sharp, high-pitched shriek cut through the air, vibrating her teeth. The ground beneath them split. A crack zigzagged across the lot, like a wound opening, and from it came roots. What? Writhing. They reached toward her, hungry. Parker grabbed her arm. We need to go. But June stood firm. This is where it ends. She dropped the lily, pulled out the red book from her bag, the one they'd stolen from the pedestal. She flipped to the last page. Blank. She wrote something, with a pen made from a splinter of the broken jar. It cut her finger. Blood soaked the ink. One word. Unroot. The ground shuddered. The roots recoiled. The spiral bent, then snapped. The world lurched, as if reality itself had been tethered to something underground, and now that tether was broken. All around them, lilies wilted, in gardens, in cracks, in children's drawings. Gone. Back at the workshop, the green book burned. No matches, no lighter. It burned on its own, and this time it didn't stop. Ashes curled into the wind like dead petals. Parker and June stood in the empty lot as the crack in the earth sealed itself. The air felt clean, lighter. Will stood beside them, alive. But as they turned to leave, June paused. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. A faint voice, singing, from somewhere far below. The melody familiar, a lullaby, soft, persistent, hungry. Part 7. The cost of breaking things. They thought it was over. The spiral was broken. The books were gone. The house had vanished into earth and wind. But 3 nights later, June dreamed of the jars. In the dream, she was back in that room, the one with no windows and no warmth. Rows and rows of shelves stretched into forever, and every jar was broken. Liquid spilled across the floor like sap, like blood. The things inside writhed, uncontained, hungry. She woke up screaming. Will rushed in. "It's okay," he said, arms around her. "You're okay. It's over." But it wasn't. June could feel it, like a crack in her reflection. The spiral had snapped, but something else had escaped. She started seeing them. People who didn't quite blink right. Children who smiled too wide. Lily petals in places no lilies had ever grown. A janitor at school wore gardening gloves. A substitute teacher smelled like dirt. A baby across the street stared at her for too long, too knowingly. And sometimes she saw Miss Hallie, just for a second, in the reflection of a store window, in the rearview mirror of a parked car, on the edge of a dream. She never moved, never spoke, just watched. Parker noticed too. He started wearing an iron pendant around his neck, muttering about residual echoes, dimensional tears, and mycelium consciousness. He stayed up late tracing post-spiral patterns. "There's a feedback loop," he said one night, pacing the floor of the workshop. "We didn't kill her. We cut the root, but the soil still remembers." June sat silently, staring at her hands. They hadn't changed, but something beneath them had. What was different too? He was healthy, strong. But sometimes he'd pause mid-sentence like a radio switching stations. Sometimes he'd hum the lullaby. And once she found him in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, whispering to something she couldn't see. The garden came back. Not overnight. It started with a single flower, on the edge of the street. Then another in a crack in the sidewalk. Then 20. A circle. Perfect. Parker called it regrowth memory. When something that old dies, it doesn't go quietly, he said. It scatters. Pieces of it hide. Wait. And then they bloom again. But we burned the book. We burned the symbol, he said. not the thing behind it. They needed to find the source, not the spiral, not the car, the seed. It was Will who remembered. He said there had been a place before the jars, a room beneath the garden, a black staircase, a door that pulsed like a wound. I never went inside, he whispered, but I heard her singing from down there. Not Miss Hallie, something older. So they went back to the empty lot, where the spiral had ended, where the ground had sealed. They brought shovels, crowbars, salt, and the last page of the red book torn before it burned, a map perhaps, or a warning. They dug for hours. June's fingers blistered. Her eyes stung from the dirt. But eventually they hit something hard. Stone, carved with symbols, spirals, roots. It wasn't a basement. It was older than the house had ever been. They pried it open. A hole yawned beneath them, breathing rot and roses. Will clutched her hand. Do we have to go down there? June nodded. If we don't, she said, something else will come up. The stairs were narrow, cold. The deeper they went, the less real the air felt. Sound became thick. Breathing was like trying to inhale through syrup. And then, a chamber, round, alive. Walls made of twisting roots, veins pulsing, and in the center, a mirror. It wasn't a normal mirror. It had no glass, only depth, only the sensation of being watched from the other side. And in the mirror, Miss Hallie, not standing, not smiling, floating, eyes closed, skin peeling like petals. She was never a person, Parker whispered. She was a reflection, June said, of what people wanted, of what they feared losing. Parker reached into his bag, pulled out a silver blade, a ritual dagger. He handed it to June. You're the one she marked. June stepped toward the mirror. Inside, Miss Hallie's eyes opened, and she began to speak, not with sound, but memory. I was not made. I was grown. A wish cast into soil too deep. A prayer for youth whispered by mothers, mourned by children. You asked for forever. I gave it to you. June raised the blade. I didn't ask to lose everything else. She slashed the air. The blade struck the surface, and the mirror cracked, not like glass, like bone. A scream rippled through the room. The roots recoiled. The chamber trembled. Will fell to his knees. Parker dropped the salt. The mirror shattered. Light poured out. Not white, not gold. Something deeper, older, like starlight in reverse. June didn't look away, even when it reached her. Even when the light touched her eyes and whispered everything she ever forgot. Then silence, real silence. No breath, no roots, no spiral, just June, kneeling before a broken mirror, her reflection gone. Part 8, Where Roots Remember. The chamber was gone. No roots, no mirror, just dirt, heavy and quiet. They were lying on the forest floor. The hole they had dug was gone too, sealed like a wound that never existed. Only the bruises on their arms and the blade in June's pocket proved it had ever happened. The lilies were gone, everywhere. Not just in their town, but across every spiral mark they had mapped. Parker confirmed it online. Forums filled with conspiracy chatter suddenly went quiet. The green car hadn't been seen in over 2 weeks. Gardens wilted. No new disappearances. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a burial. Will recovered slowly. He slept through most days. When he was awake, he barely spoke. He drew circles, loops, twisting vines, but they no longer led anywhere. He never colored them green. June went back to school. She didn't speak much either. No one asked where she'd been. It was like people had forgotten, or chosen to. Memory was pliable that way. bendable, disposable. One day she walked past the house on Larkspur Lane. It had returned. New paint, new roof, but wrong. Too clean, too hollow. No one answered the door. That night she dreamed again. This time she stood in a field, a real one. Nothing grew there, but the earth pulsed beneath her bare feet, like it was breathing. And from the dark soil something rose. Not a flower, not a root, a photo. Her, smiling, with no eyes. She woke gasping. The knife was still under her pillow. The silver burned her fingers, but she didn't drop it. She just stared at her reflection in the blade. It blinked a moment too late. The next week she visited Parker. He was building something. Not tech, a shrine. Books, notes, maps, candles, everything they'd collected. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Preserving," he said, "in case it comes back, or something worse tries to take its place." June nodded. The truth had nowhere else to live, except in people like them. He gave her a gift, a small camera, Polaroid. He'd fixed it, cleaned it. "No film," he said, "but I thought you should have it." She didn't ask why. She already knew, because sometimes the things we destroy leave pieces, not to hurt us, but to remind us that once we were not careful. Summer came. The air turned thick again. The sky stayed blue too long. And one day, as June walked past the edge of town, she saw a child kneeling beside a flower, a single lily, growing out of asphalt. She froze. The child plucked the flower and smiled. June stepped forward. "What's your name?" The girl looked up. "Hallie," she said. June's heart stopped. The girl ran off, laughing, leaving petals behind. That night, June took out the Polaroid. No film, but she held it to her eye anyway, looked through the lens, at the sky, at the street, at herself, and clicked. No sound, no image, just a feeling that the world had blinked. There are things you never fully kill. Ideas, memories, hunger. You bury them, you forget them, and then one spring morning they bloom again. And somewhere far beneath the soil, the garden waits.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.